On this episode of the Carolina Sports Guy, we're going to break down an early projection of the 53-man roster and practice squad for the Carolina Panthers. This first edition, we're going to be strictly looking at defense. That's right. Defense.
Oh, yeah!
YouTube friends and family, it's another edition of the Carolina Sports Guy. I want you to hit subscribe. Doesn't cost anything. Pound that like button. Leave some comments. Let me know what you think of content and videos like this as I'm putting more out. And also hit the bell notification so you can be notified for more upcoming videos like the one you get ready to see. Alright guys, Carolina Sports Guy here, and we're going to look at an early projection. 2 months out from hitting Spartanburg, hitting training camp, and the one thing you have to look at this 90-man roster right now is how fluid it is. You kind of look at it and you're going to sit here and say, well, you got a 53-man roster. We're kind of going to look at 53 men. You kind of take a long snapper off, a kicker, and a punter. 95% of the time, that's what happens. Some teams have kept more than one kicker before. I don't know if someone's had 2 punters. I doubt it. Now, putting one on stash on the practice squad, sure. And a long snapper, sometimes guys don't have a long snapper put on the list. They have a guy who's a center or a guard who's also the long snapper. But the more that long snapper plays during the game, you risk injury. So it's kind of good to have a guy who can fill in an emergency situation, but he's only really being your long snapper. So when you take those 3 guys off the roster, the long snapper, the kicker, and the punter, you're down to 50. And most teams traditionally try to have 25 defensive players, 25 offensive. So I've kind of taken a look at this, and I've got it like this broken down. We're going to keep 10 defensive backs, I believe, as we break camp at Spartanburg heading into the regular season. I think we'll keep 8 defensive ends, defensive tackles, so that's 8 on the defensive line, 7 linebackers. Now, this is a little bit different from the past. Last year, Matt Rule's first year, kept 9 defensive linemen to start the season. 4 of those were defensive tackles, 4 were defensive ends. F.A. Abada was kind of listed as a defensive end and defensive tackle. We also had a couple other guys who played in and out, but that's traditionally what it was. We kept 10 defensive backs last year between the corner and the safety position, and 6 linebackers. We had 1 punter, and that kind of filled out 26 men on the 53-man roster on defense. So who do I think is going to make this roster? Well, right away, let's take a look at the 10 defensive backs I've got down. I want to look at the corners first. I don't think it's any secret whether it's his last year or not. Donte Jackson is going to play corner. As a matter of fact, I think he might even slide to slot corner, but I definitely think he's going to start. JayCee Horn, the first-round pick, number 8 pick overall in South Carolina. I think he's going to be penciled in from day one as your shutdown corner, so he's going to be your other corner. Other corners on the roster, the 5th-round pick out of Washington, Keith Taylor. I definitely think he's going to make the roster as a corner. Troy Pride Jr., who was drafted last year out of Notre Dame, I think he'll also make it. We signed Rashaan Melvin in the off-season free agency before the draft took place. I think he's going to make the roster. Myles Hartsfield. Now, Myles Hartsfield can play safety and corner and special teams, so I'm kind of putting him in on this list. And A.J. Bowie. A.J. Bowie came to us late in free agency right before the draft. Played for Jacksonville for many years. I believe he played for the Broncos. He's going to serve a 2-game PED suspension. So coming out the gate, he will not be able to play the first 2 weeks. However, I do see in him being a starting corner, or maybe we can move Donte into the slot corner eventually. And that's who I see there. Now, as far as our safeties, I'm still looking for an upgraded safety. I think the team is satisfied with Justin Burris at being one of the safeties. Sam Franklin played well. He played corner and he played safety. I think he definitely can be a safety candidate to be on this team. Delano Hall, who was signed late in free agency, or right after the draft, right around the time of the draft, I think he'll also make this roster as such. And that kind of concludes the 10 guys I've got listed down. Now, another guy we got to keep in mind is Jeremy Chinn, who we got listed as a linebacker, and that's what the Panthers have on their roster. that Chinn will play linebacker. However, I definitely see him probably switching up, playing a little bit of strong safety. He's such an integral part of our team, and Matt Rule loves a guy who's versatile, who can play the safety position and can also go out and play outside linebacker. And that's the good thing about Chinn. We can list him as a linebacker. He actually gives us depth at defensive back if we need to convert him there. Now, defensive line, I've got 8. And a lot of you don't think we've kept 9 and 10 in the past. It's true. We're going to look at 4 defensive ends, 4 defensive tackles. We'll look at the defensive tackles first. Derrick Brown, our first-round pick last year from Auburn. Definitely a guy who's going to start in the middle. And I believe we can put him in there with DaQuan Jones. We just picked him up from the Tennessee Titans in free agency. I think that makes a strong pair. Bravvion Roy, we drafted late last year, I believe in the 6th round from Baylor. He's an individual that can fill in admirably. Maybe start if you had to have him, but he's definitely going to play some valuable minutes. And I can look at a guy like Morgan Fox that we just got in free agency from the Rams. He's very versatile, much like F.A. Abada last year, but I think it's maybe an upgrade. Morgan Fox can play defensive tackle, and he can move out to defensive end. And I do see in him registering a few sacks this year with the defensive line that we have. Now, look at our defensive ends. Brian Burns, first and foremost, is explosive. He will be a defensive end. He will be out there. He will be mixing them up, and there's no doubt about him at starting defensive end. Now, the question is going to be, we're going to have Marquis Haynes. It's going to be the other defensive end. Plays really well, and I think he's going to get the start too. Now, YGM, Yetur Gross-Matos, is a guy that I think is going to come on strong and probably take over Haynes' spot as a starter on the end. He's got to develop a little bit more, but I think he's ready. The only guy left off this list is Daviyon Nixon, who really is a defensive tackle. But I think where Morgan Fox can fill in more at the end, we can get Daviyon Nixon to come in, and he's probably going to even play a little bit more, I think, than Bravvion Roy will. So keep an eye on the 5th round pick out of Iowa, because I think he's going to accumulate a lot of playing time. And saying that, when we switch over to linebackers, we look at a guy like Christian Miller. Can play a little bit of defensive end, maybe. And Haason Reddick definitely is going to play some defensive end, but we've got him listed as a linebacker. So that's why our depth on defensive end. We got some linebackers who on 3rd down specialists are going to probably come in and rush the passer, or on non-specific downs. We're going to actually do that as well. Now, the 7 linebackers I got listed, I've already mentioned Jeremy Chinn. It's listed as a linebacker. I can see him playing more safety, but definitely think he's going to get in the game and do well. I did mention Christian Miller. Now, there's a little iffy spot on Christian Miller. Will he actually make the roster? Because he's not really a Matt Rule guy. He played his rookie year, didn't play last year because of COVID. He's coming in this year. So I can even see him getting cut, but I do have him making the roster. Jermaine Carter played well last year. I heard he was in Rule's doghouse. Still think he's good enough. He looked better than Tahir Whitehead did, who we finally got rid of. So I think Jermaine Carter is going to be very valuable there. Shaq Thompson is going to be in the middle. Dependable. I think, especially if he has more talent around him like he had with Luke and Thomas Davis, he can play better. When he has people like Tahir Whitehead, puts a lot on his shoulders, he doesn't do as well. And I think the free agent acquisition we acquired from the Chargers, Denzel Perryman from the U, is going to be someone who's going to come in, play a lot of minutes, and I can see him being a very valuable asset as well. And I did mention Haason Reddick too, playing defensive end, linebacker. It's very valuable. The other linebacker I got making the roster, believe it or not, is Frankie Luvu, special teams ace, a linebacker that we got, who came from the Jets in free agency. I think he's going to make the roster. He looks like a Rule guy. Now, our punter will be Joseph Charlton. Now, there's a little bit of thing I'd like to put an asterisk here, because we did take a free agent gamble. I say free agent college draft. Oscar Draguicevich, I believe is his name, who was the 2nd leading punter in college this year at Washington State. We're bringing in him to give Charlton some competition. Hey, if Charlton gets hurt, Draguicevich actually outperforms him, we could see a change into the guard at punter. But right now, I think Charlton will make it. I don't even think we'll keep Draguicevich on the practice squad. It's got to keep an eye out for guys like that we bring in for a tryout. Now, as far as the practice squad goes, I see us keeping a safety, a corner, a defensive tackle, defensive end, 2 linebackers. I'll get to our safeties first. Kenny Robinson. He was drafted last year, got cut, back on the roster, back and forth. I still see him making the practice squad. That could change. I just have him making it. Stanley Thomas Oliver, the corner. We drafted him as well last year. Didn't get a lot out of him. He was cut a couple times, brought back on the practice squad. I think he did get in some games and played a little bit, but I think he might develop and be able to stay on the practice squad. Phil Hoskins, defensive tackle from Kentucky. He was our 7th round pick. I think we could have got him in free agency with the college drafts. We took a gamble on him. I saw some free safeties that were out there, some offensive guards we didn't take, and I just think this is an individual that will probably stick on the 53-man roster eventually, but right now he's probably going to be on the practice squad. Austin Larkin, defensive end. He got in a few games last year and played pretty well, but he also was on the practice squad, back and forth from the roster, practice squad. I think that'll happen again with Austin Larkin, but you just never know if he can really come in and shine in training camp. Now, last 2 picks we'll have on the practice squad, I believe 6 out of the 12 will be defense. Paddy Fisher, the undrafted free agent from Northwestern. I love his game. I'm going to have a hard time cracking that 53-man roster, but since he didn't get drafted, I think maybe we can stash this guy on the practice squad, watch him develop. We might be seeing a guy who can come up and play some great minutes down the road. Finally, I put an asterisk by this guy. A couple days ago when I came up with my list, I just found out right after I did the list, Chris Orr, the free agent rookie last year from Wisconsin, who actually got, I believe, in a couple games, stayed on a practice squad, looked the part. He was cut for a defensive tackle that I don't think is going to make the roster. We're not going to get into names or anything like that. But I got Chris Orr making this roster, and I know he's cut right now. But remember, 53-man roster 2 months before you hit training camp, it's going to change. And I really think we'll probably bring Chris Orr back. Somebody will be cut. I'll just find him a way of getting cut at the very end. And as the season starts, we'll find this guy on the practice squad sooner or later. That's why I'm sticking to him. That's what we're going to do. So that's an early look, like I said, at the 53-man predicted roster and practice squad on defense for the Carolina Panthers. If you got any comments, maybe you don't like who I've kept on this roster, maybe you see somebody else. That's why it's an early look. It's late May. We're not even in July yet when they're going to hit camp. And remember, these guys are not really going to start getting cut until the middle of August to the end of August. So fluid camps with injuries, guys being made available, guys not performing up to par, it's going to happen. So Carolina Sports Guy, subscribe to this channel. Whatever you do, hit that like button, hit the bell notification, and make some comments. And we'll see you next time on Carolina Sports Guy.